Hello everyone, thank you for watching today's video. Please like, share, and check out the author in the description. And with that, let's begin. Chapter 18, Genin Exams. Naruto POV. Hey Naruto, are you as nervous as me about today? Temari asked as we sat at the kitchen table eating our breakfast. I looked at her chuckling. We don't have to be nervous about anything. After all, we are strong enough to be Jonin by now, and we both know that we will ace the test, since we know what we'll have to do, I said, trying to reassure my fellow blonde. Yeah, I guess you're right, she said, before digging into her cereals. What do you think? How will Gaara react when Rasa tells him what happened to Kankuro? I asked while putting my plate in the sink. Rasa had told us that Gaara would come back today in the morning, right on time for the exams. I don't know. I hope my father has a good plan to tell him, because I fear that he will go berserk if he realizes it all too sudden. Temari answered, frowning. Yeah, I had the same thoughts. I hope we can calm him down fast enough if something goes wrong, I stated, going to the stairs to go to my room. I got my stuff from my desk, smiling upon seeing the sorted and labeled scrolls which were stacked on a separate shelf, the work of 5 clones over the time of a week. Although one scroll still sat atop my desk, the summoning scroll, which I still hadn't found the time to try out. I'll probably have enough time to do so after the Genin exams, so I went out of my room and headed downstairs, where Temari was already waiting for me. Alright kids, this will be our last class, since you will all hopefully pass the exams in the afternoon, the teacher said while smiling at us. That was when we all felt a large burst of chakra coming from the Kazekij's office. Temari and I looked at each other worriedly, and, without caring for what the teacher said, dashed out of the classroom and towards the raging Gaara. When we reached Rasa and his son, we found that Rasa was unconscious on the ground guarded by his Anbu, while Gaara was thrashing around on the opposing side of the office. None of the Anbu seemed to have the guts to do something so Temari and I stepped into the room immediately, earning a hard glare from Gaara. We saw in his eyes that Shikaku had taken control over his body, which slightly surprised me, since I thought that I had already secured the seal enough when I first altered it. Gaara, I know you can hear me. Come on, you know you don't want this. Temari screamed at her brother, who seemed to be responding slightly to her voice, as the sand swirling around the redhead calmed significantly. I know you are hurt, but believe me, we all have to live with it. Temari spoke again. Meanwhile, I went to the Kazekij, who had woken up in the meantime. What happened? I whispered to the still somewhat confused Rasa. I don't know. He came into the office after his mission and asked why he couldn't feel Kankuro's chakra in the village. Then I told him that Kankuro was killed 2 weeks ago and he just went crazy. The man told me while looking at his remaining son worriedly. I nodded and went to look if Temari needed any help when I saw her embracing Gaara, crying silently into his shoulder. Gaara hesitantly hugged his sister back while shooting glares in his father's direction. After Temari had calmed down a bit, he softly broke free from her embrace and turned to face the Kazekij. Why did you send me away? Were you afraid that I would lose control? What were you thinking? That I would be less hurt when you tell me a week after it happened? Answer me, he screamed at his father, making the Anbu around him take up defensive positions. I don't know why I did send you away. Perhaps I was afraid. Maybe I just wanted to have you out of town so I could realize what had happened myself. All I know is that it was not the right decision and that I am sorry. Rasa apologized, squirming under Gaara's intense glare. Gaara's eyes softened and he went to his father, but the Anbu got in his way. Surprisingly, one look of the Jinchuriki was enough so that they would back away in fear. He went to his father and, earning a surprised look from Rasa, engulfed him in a hug. It's all good. I forgive you, Gaara mumbled. After a long talk between Gaara and Rasa, the redhead noticed Baki's absence. He went away just yesterday with a squad of Anbu to assassinate the Anbu that killed Kankuro. The Kazekij answered to the question of the redhead. This caused a puzzled look from my fellow Jinchuriki. Why did you wait for almost a week until you decided to send someone after Kankuro's killer? He asked. Well, you see, the 2 Anbu were after Kankuro and Temari, and seeing that they didn't accomplish their mission, I figured that the remaining Anbu would just hide outside of the village before coming back again to finish his task. That's why I decided to wait for Baki to come back from his mission, since he is one of our best interrogators, which he did just 2 days ago in the evening. I let him rest the evening and told him to go for the Iwanin in the morning. Rasa explained while looking at me and Temari with narrowed eyes. Now go on, you have Genin exams to beat, he said, shooing us out of his office. When we got to the classroom, our teacher looked at us worriedly but didn't say anything. He led us to a different classroom and let us take 3 of the free seats. Then he went to the front and repeated again what we had to do to pass the exam. A clone, hit 12 out of 14 targets with either Shuriken or Kunai, 1 wind jutsu of our choice and another jutsu from any category. I closed my eyes and meditated while the others were called up one after another. Being in Uzumaki, I knew that I was the last person to get called up since they were going through the name list in alphabetical order. When I heard Sabaku no Gaara being called, I opened my eyes and smiled at Gaara, who went out of the room to the examiners. After a few minutes, Temari got called, leaving me alone in the room. Good luck, I said as she left the room. She smiled at me and closed the door. Then after another few minutes the teacher came into the room and looked at me. You're the last one. Good luck, he wished, smiling while he led me through the floor and into a small room which obviously had to be reinforced somehow to withstand the amount of jutsu that were performed in it. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze? Asked one of the 3 men that were sitting on the only desk in the room. Yes, I replied. Good, I believe you know what to do. The same man asked. I nodded and went to the wall where the targets hang. The examiners watched me slightly confused as I took out my kunai. Suddenly a second me proofed into existence. The examiners watched in awe as me and my clone each fired 7 kunai at the targets and hit the center on every single one of them. I smiled as I formed a Rasengan in my hand and shoved it into my clone's stomach. The clone crashed into the wall and dispelled in a cloud of smoke. And for the wind jutsu, I said while creating another Rasengan in my hand before adding my wind chakra to it, forming a Rasen Shuriken. The instructors looked at the spiraling sphere with big eyes while I was taking aim to throw it at the opposing wall. When it hit the wall it seemed as if nothing happened, and the proctors already made notes that my jutsu wasn't effective, but then there was a silent rumble, and as the men looked up to see where that sound came from, the wall began to fall apart into a massive cloud of dust. After the dust had settled, the wall was completely evaporated, and all that was left were a few small piles of dust. The sensei in the room which I had just opened looked at me terrified while his students had watched me open-mouthed. Hee, sorry Rosetta, wait a second, I'll fix that so you can continue, one of the proctors said, grinning while going through handsignals. I took a step back as the man walked up next to me and put his hands on the floor. Where once was a wall erupted another one just like the old one and closed the 2 rooms off again. So, did I pass? I asked, grinning after the proctor had retaken his seat. With flying colors, but please refrain from using that jutsu inside of a house from now on, the man in the middle said, smiling, presenting me with a headband. I bowed slightly and took it out of his hands, putting it safely in one of my pouches. Congratulations. You are now officially a genin of Sunagakure, the 2 others said before taking their notes and starting to tidy their places up. Thank you, I said, bowing again and then leaving the room and walking to the room where we were supposed to go when we had passed. Chapter 19 Busted. Naruto POV. I walked into the room, my hands inside my pockets, and looked around. Most of my fellow genins and our teacher looked at me slightly worried while Temari and Gaara just looked at me puzzled. What did you do? Temari asked after I had sat down next to her. I passed, I said sheepishly. You know what she means. We felt the explosion, Gaara replied before Temari could. Yeah, I might have destroyed one of the walls from the room. I grinned, scratching my head. Temari's eyes went wide. You what? How did you do that? She basically screamed at me. I may have shown the instructors the power of my Rasen Shuriken. I smiled. Temari and Gaara looked at me shocked since they knew that this was an S-rank jutsu. But the rest of the new genins just looked at me puzzled before going back to whatever they were doing. Temari just shook her head at me and then looked over the chatting genin. Gaara didn't say anything and returned to staring at the ceiling. 18 from us have made it, Temari murmured. Yeah, that means 6 new genin teams in Suna's forces, I said, making her realize that she had thought out loud. She grinned at me and then turned to the door as she heard someone opening it. In came the 3 examiners. They went to the front and gave our sensei a pile of papers before smiling at the class and disappearing in 3 clouds of sand. The teacher looked at the papers and then went through the rows giving the papers to the students. When I got mine I quickly read it and smiled. Looks like we and Gaara are a team, I whispered to Temari, grinning. Attention everyone, your respective senseis will be here shortly, they will take it from here. Good luck to all of you and may Kami always smile upon you, the teacher said before taking his bag and going to the door. As soon as he went out of the room the new genins started chatting loudly in the groups of 3 that they had been assigned to, not noticing the swirl of sand that had appeared in front of them. As the Kazekage stepped out of said sand whirlwind he looked at the chatting children in front of him smiling, before looking at us grinning. He lifted his hands into a single hand sign and suddenly everyone talking tasted sand on their tongues. They looked to the front and their eyes went wide realizing who stood there. Congratulations to you all on becoming Shinobi of Sunagakure. As you know I am the Kazekage. I am the one who will give you missions. Now that your senseis are finally here they will explain the rest to you, he said while the door opened, revealing a group of 5 men and women. Naruto, Temari, Gaara, you will come with me, he said, going towards the group of shinobi. The 5 looked at us awkwardly before making way for Rasa and us. Meet you guys in my office, Rasa said before disappearing in a cloud of smoke. Gaara looked at us and we disappeared simultaneously in a cloud of sand. As you know I will not be your sensei. That is Baki's job once he is back from his mission. I expect you 3 to continue with your training and not to slack off. Once your sensei is back you will get your first mission. Now I would like to speak with Naruto alone, Rasa said, making Temari and Gaara leave his office. But not before giving me a worried look. Don't worry, I'll find you after we are finished, I said, grinning. As soon as the door closed Rasa's look turned angry. Why do I keep getting reports from Baki that apparently there were 2 kids also looking for the same man just last week? He asked me, his voice dangerously calm. I turned pale, before sighing and closing my eyes. We may have used the time you gave us to finish what we couldn't end, I said silently, expecting Rasa to explode. Why? He asked, surprisingly calm. Temari was going to leave with or without me and try to find the Anbu, so I decided that it would be best if I would accompany her to ensure that nothing would happen to her. We used the first 2 days to find, interrogate, and kill the Anbu before we headed towards the spa we told you about. I explained, keeping my gaze at the floor. So you're telling me that I have sent a squad of my best Anbu and your sensei after a dead man? He asked with an even calmer voice. Yes, I'm sorry, we disobeyed your orders, I said, finally having the courage to look at the Kazegage. He was smiling slightly as if he thought of this situation as funny. Well, at least it worked out. I'll write Baki that he can return, so you can start with the missions. But just one warning. One more incident of you not following my orders and you will be punished. Am I clear? He asked with a stern voice. Yes, very clear, I replied, bowed and left the office. I sighed when I left his office. I knew that Gaara and Temari would ask why Rasa wanted to talk to me alone. As soon as I entered the house I have come to call home, the 2 siblings looked at me demanding an explanation. It was about our trip last week, I said to Temari. How did he know? She asked, knowing that her father probably asked about us hunting the Anbu. Baki and his squad came across some of the same people that we had asked for information. I explained. Okay, I officially don't understand anything anymore. Can you please explain? Gaara interrupted with a questioning look. We may have hunted down the Anbu that killed Kankuro, Temari admitted. Gaara's eyes widened in realization. What did the Kazegage say? Temari asked me in a worried tone. If we get caught disobeying him again, then we will have to face the consequences. For now, he just warned me. He will tell Baki that he can come back, so our training will probably start in the next days. I relayed the words of the village's leader. Okay, I'll go to Kankuro's grave. Wanna come along? Gaara asked while heading to the door. Yeah, sure. Temari said yes, sounds good. I was planning on heading there later anyway, I stated, smiling, and we left the house. Chapter 20 Tiger. Naruto POV. I woke up slightly before sunrise and prepared breakfast. I knew Temari and Gaara wouldn't be up for at least a few hours, so I only made some bacon and eggs for me. After eating, I went to my room, changed into my shinobi attire, and left the house in search of an unoccupied training field. When I found one, I sat down on a small dune and took one of my storage scrolls out. I channeled a bit of chakra into it and smiled when the smoke cleared, revealing the summoning scroll from my mother. I carefully opened it and once again looked at all the names that were on it. Almost every one of them were Uzumakis, with the exception of my father Minato Namikaze Uzumaki and Reito Namikaze Uzumaki. I got a kunai and cut my left hand, just enough to draw blood, letting it fall onto the next free spot in the list of the contract. I then proceeded to write my name in the space with the blood. I smiled as I closed the scroll again and resealed it into the storage scroll. I focused and went through the hand signs required for the summoning jutsu before sending chakra into my right hand and laying it on the desert ground. A big cloud of smoke appeared, blocking my view. I waited patiently for the cloud to disappear and was slightly amused when I heard a growl come from the dissipating smoke. When it had completely disappeared, I stood face to face with a 5-foot-high tiger which was growling at me, baring its teeth. Whoa, calm down. I don't want to fight, I said, raising my hands slightly to show that I didn't mean any harm. The tiger stopped growling and slowly began to walk around me. We haven't been summoned for quite some time now. Who are you? The tiger asked in a deep voice. I am Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, son of Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze and Minato Namikaze Uzumaki. Nice to meet you, I exclaimed, having to look up as he stood before me. You are Kushina's boy. I don't think so. I bet that you are not even an Uzumaki. I mean, look at you, Suna headband, blonde hair, the tiger said, showing off his massive fangs. Well, since you knew my mother, I believe that you know that the Uzumaki were wiped out in the Third Great War. Kushina was amongst the few Uzumakis that could survive and the only one that was officially alive. I also suspect you to know that she had married one Minato Namikaze, 4th Hokage and master of the Flying Raijin. That is why I don't have red hair, since I have inherited it from my father. As for the Suna headband, that is because, after my parents died on the day I was born, the village drove me away and I have found a new home in the sand. I tried to reason with the feline. The tiger seemed to think about something before taking a step back and closing his eyes. Suddenly, there was a big cloud of smoke next to him, and when it disappeared, it revealed another tiger, but with many battle scars that were displayed on his body, as well as an eye patch over his left eye. He was also a good 2 feet taller than his younger conspecific. Master, please hear me out. I have been summoned by this human claiming to be an Uzumaki. While his explanation for his divergent looks are valid, I wanted to have certainty before I would agree to his summoning proposal. The younger tiger spoke, bowing before the hard eye of his superior. Said tiger looked at me with his one eye and slowly walked towards me. So you are the son of Kushina and Minato. He mumbled slowly, circling around me. Please pardon the behavior of Gu. He is not old enough to have met your father. He only knows them from stories and myths. I can see the resemblance you have with you, father. I am Akira, the Grand Master of the Tigers, and I hereby accept you as our new summoner. The one-eyed tiger said, slightly bowing his head. I bowed too and then looked at the two tigers in front of me, puzzled. Don't I have to pass a test or something? I asked, remembering the test from Gamabunta in the other timeline. No, the fact that you have Uzumaki blood running through your body is enough for us to be at your service. Akira replied. You can go, Gu, he said to the other tiger, who only nodded and then vanished in a bit of smoke. Now, if you don't mind me asking, how did you get the summoning contract? I mean, it's not like your parents could give it to you. The tiger said, once again looking at me. Back when I was in Konoha, the Hokage was in possession of my parents' last wills and the stuff that I had inherited. When I went to Suna, he sent it to the Kazekage with the instructions to give it to me once he deemed me ready. I explained. I see, Akira began before being interrupted by a cloud of smoke appearing. He sighed as he watched it dissipate and a small tiger cub stood before him. Akira. The cub yipped silently and looked at the grown tiger with glittering eyes. You are early. Again, the one-eyed tiger sighed. The small cub's eyes widened slightly. I am so sorry, father, it said silently, bowing before Akira. Well, since you already are here. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, this is my daughter Akira. Akira, this is our new summoner Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. It is a pleasure to meet you, I said, smiling at the little tiger. The pleasure is all mine, she replied, bowing slightly. Well, my job here is done. Akira will be your personal summon from now on. She will always be by your side until you say otherwise. I will take my leave then. I hope to see you soon. The great tiger spoke, bowing his head and disappearing in a cloud of smoke. Chapter 21 Briefing. Naruto POV. So you are my personal summon, I said, looking at the little tiger that stood before me. Yes, I am to stay with you wherever you go and to try and aid you however I can, Akira said, bowing slightly. No need to be so respectful. I really don't like to be treated that way, I said, earning a confused look from the tiger girl. Okay, she said after a moment before suddenly shrinking to the size of a rabbit and jumping onto my shoulder. She sure takes this not so respectful serious. Yeah, but it's all right. After all, she will be with me for the rest of her life. Yeah, I guess so. On another note, when you are free again, come to me. I want to talk with you about something. Yeah, sure, but can't we do that now? Not when your sensei is coming. It will take a while. Okay, I'll come when I have time. I shook my head at the mysterious fox before looking in the direction where I could feel Baki's chakra signature coming towards me. Akira glared at him and growled silently, which actually sounded way too cute than to be somewhat intimidating. Hey, calm down, that is just my sensei, I whispered while scratching the little tiger behind her ears. A second later, Baki stood in front of me and looked confused at my new summon. I will explain when Temari and Gaara are here. No need to repeat the story unnecessarily, I said, dismissing his questioning look for now. Well then, let us find them. I really want to hear this, the man said before jumping away from the training ground. And that is why I have my new partner. I finished telling my story to my team, smiling. Gaara and Baki nod contempt while Temari just keeps looking at Akira. How can a tiger be so tiny? I mean, look at her, she is so cute, she squealed, which earned her a shocked look from her brother and sensei, since she absolutely never does. I just laughed it off and winked at Akira before letting her jump off my shoulder onto the floor. Gaara looked at the tiger confused, whilst Baki, knowing more about summons, just watched curiously. And Temari slowly calmed down and observed the tiger with more interest. Then suddenly Akira began to grow, causing Gaara's and Temari's eyes to widen. When she stopped growing, she was around as tall as Gaara, who is the smallest one of us at 5 feet. Do I look capable enough now, Temari-san? Akira asked in a deep yet somehow feminine voice. Temari was too shocked to answer her and just nodded, which caused Akira to grin widely, showing off her fangs. Great. Remember, never judge a book by its cover, she said before shrinking back to her earlier size and reclaiming her spot on my shoulder. Meanwhile, Gaara got out of his shock and watched the tiger interested as she snuggled into my neck and closed her eyes. Wow, was all that came from Baki. Even though he knew about the ability of some summons to manipulate their own size, he obviously never had witnessed it himself, which led to him underestimating it severely. Okay, now for the main reason we have all gathered here. The Kazekage has entrusted us with a mission. We will be away for quite some time, approximately 3 weeks, and we will travel through the Land of Stone into the territory of the Land of Earth to gather information and if possible assassinate a rogue ninja that has been terrorizing the farmers around Iwagakure, he explained. But why do we have to do this? Iwa has its own shinobi program, and won't they be mad when they find out that we were doing a mission in their territory, which on top of that was also brought to us by their people? Gaara asked, looking at our sensei in confusion. Yeah, under normal circumstances it would. But Iwagakure has already lost 4 teams to this particular bandit, and their daimyo forbade that more shinobi go after him, as not to weaken Iwa's strength. And after hearing this, the farmers sent a messenger to us asking for assistance. We will head out in an hour. Other questions? Baki explained, ending with him looking at us. Actually, I have one. If this man has single-handedly killed 12 shinobi of Iwagakure, why does Rasa send a fresh genin team to investigate on this instead of a battle-hardened team of Chunin or Jana? I asked, earning nods from Temari and Gaara. Well, we are far from your ordinary genin team. Gaara was on countless missions before and always has proven to be quite skilled in the ways of a shinobi, and you two have tracked down an Anbu and managed to kill him by yourself. So I would say that you guys are more than ready for this mission, Baki said, not without pride in his voice. And we will always have a team of our Anbu at the ready, so we only need to send a message and they will be there. He added, smiling at the three of us. Fair enough, I said, standing up. Then, I'll meet you in an hour, our sensei said before vanishing in a cloud of sand. Temari and Gaara looked at Akira with a devious glint in their eyes. Since we already have packed, we have more time to spend with you, they said almost in sync. Akira squealed fearfully and pressed herself into my neck. Okay, that's enough. She is not some toy you can just cuddle with. She is a living creature, I said, taking a step away from my two friends. Besides, I need to get some stuff for our mission. See you at the gates, I said quickly and disappeared in a cloud of sand. Thanks, Naruto, Akira mumbled while I sealing some supplies into a storage scroll. No problem, they have to realize that you are not a pet, but a partner, I said before sealing a wooden katana in a separate scroll so that I could train with the Kenjutsu katas which I had found in the scrolls from my mother. I look forward to seeing you in action, Akira said before I headed out to the gates to meet up with my team. Chapter 22 Camp. Naruto POV. After 7 hours of traveling, we finally reached the border between Wind Country and Ishigaki. We had previously decided to set up camp at this point so that we could have a relatively decent rest before going into enemy territory. I unsealed a small rent and assembled it. Naruto, come over, called Gaara me over. I finished setting up my tent and went to my teammates and my sensei. Since we are not in enemy territory yet, I will let a clone stand guard, so that we can sleep through the night. But for now I want Temari and Naruto to go and get some firewood while Gaara and me set up the remaining tents and make a proper fireplace. Baki instructed. Temari and I went into the woods that were surrounding us since we had left the desert a long time ago. I was picking up some bigger logs when I noticed Temari seemingly staring at a stick which she had just picked up. I went to her and notices that she was in deep thought as she didn't even react when I put a hand on her shoulder. Then she slowly blinked twice and noticed where she was. She turned around and faced me, slightly smiling. What are you thinking about? I asked. I just noticed that this is my first mission without Kankuro, Temari answered, frowning. I looked at her sad eyes and immediately regretted asking. The rest of our assignment was finished in silence. When we got back, Gaara and Baki had already finished setting up the tents and the fireplace. So we just dumped the firewood and Baki lit it up with a small katen jutsu. After we had eaten and had extinguished the fire again, we went into our tents to sleep while Baki created several clones to secure the camp while we all slept. I went into my tent and put my kunai pouch next to my bed. Meanwhile, Akira had made herself comfortable next to my pillow with her head lying next to mine. I crawled into my sleeping bag and listened to Akira's silent breathing. Slowly I felt myself drifting into the darkness of sleep. Meanwhile in Konoha, Hiruzen Sarutobi was sitting in his chair, smoking his pipe, thinking about a certain blonde-haired boy that he had to banish a year ago. On his desk were reports stating that his advisor Danzo had been secretly building up his own Anbu force, which he apparently had not disbanded after the Third Great Ninja War. He knew that his old rival had been trying to become Hokage with himself, but he had failed, while Hiruzen had managed to become the successor of Tabarama Senju. Since then their relationship had frozen and had turned into a cold and calculated business for both of them. But with Danzo arming his route, Hiruzen knew that he had to put his foot down. He already had angered his rival enough when he had sent Anko away from the village for a long-term undercover mission to get her out of Danzo wrath, who still thought her responsible for the easy disabling of Naruto's chakra suppression seal. He sighed and looked again at the order that lay in front of him on the table. It read, Order number 104, Anbu Squad 1, 3, 7, 9, 21, 27. Assassinate Danzo Shimura while trying to keep his forces unalarmed. Deadly force against the forces of Root is allowed. This order is effective immediately. All that was missing was Hiruzen's signature at the bottom. The Hokage knew that the squads he was about to send were highly capable ninja, but Danzo still held a lot of power even though he was almost as old as the village itself. Sarutobi also suspected that Danzo had learned a few more tricks and would be a very dangerous foe. He sighed again, took a new scroll, quickly wrote a few words, sealed the scroll and sent his secretary to go to the aviary to deliver the scroll. Back with Naruto POV. I suddenly awoke to the sound of something growling silently. I opened my eyes and saw Akira standing protectively between me and the entrance to my tent. I placed a hand on the tiger's back and she immediately fell silent. Then I heard something shuffling just outside of my tent. I took a kunai and crouched away from the entrance before making a shadow clone to go check if it was clear outside. My doppelganger stuck his hand through the zipper, and after a few seconds he looked back at me, gave a thumbs up, and exploded in a cloud of smoke. When the memories from my clone came into my head, I noticed that it was just Temery, who had apparently just gone in the forest. I went back into my sleeping bag and closed my eyes. "Go back to sleep, Akira. It was just Temery," I whispered when I noticed that Akira was still on full alert. She just growled silently and didn't move a muscle. "Baki's clones will deal with every threat that might stumble in the camp," I reasoned, and with that Akira finally gave in and laid down next to me, shrinking to her normal size again. I listened how her breathing started to slow down and smiled, beginning to fall into the darkness myself. That was when I heard the crying. It was silent at first, but when I focused on it I could definitely tell that there was someone crying just outside of our small camp. I went outside, careful not to wake anyone else, and looked around. Luckily, it was almost full moon, which provided the light necessary to see the person that was sitting on a fallen tree sobbing. I noticed that Akira was following me silently, but decided not to do anything about her. I went to the crying girl and sat next to her. "Hey Tema, come here, it's okay," I whispered to my blonde teammate, putting an arm around her shoulder, pulling her close. "Let it all out, I am here for you," I whispered, trying to calm the girl down. "Akira, can you get us a blanket? There should be one under my sleeping bag," I whispered to the tiger girl that was silently watching from the shadows. She immediately went away and returned a few moments later with the blanket on her back. "Thank you," I said, and put the blanket over Temery's shoulders, while she just continued to cry into my shoulder. Chapter 23 Henge. Naruto POV. I comforted Temery until her sobbing slowly became sniffling, which then became a comfortable silence. "Why aren't you sleeping?" I asked the blonde girl in my arms. She just looked at me before burying her face in my shoulder and mumbling something that I could not understand. I lifted her head and looked her in the eyes. "What did you say?" I asked, smiling. "I had a nightmare," she whispered. "So what? It was just a dream. It will not become reality," I whispered back. "How can you be so sure?" She asked for an explanation. "Because it was just a dream, and now that you know what you are afraid of, you can work hard to become stronger so that you can prevent," I whispered, smiling at her. "But I wasn't able to save Kakuro, even though I have been training since I was 7. Temery mumbled and again began to cry. I just pulled her in my chest and stroked her back, trying to comfort her. It was going to be a long night. When dawn broke, I found myself lying in my tent with Temery sleeping peacefully next to me. I got slightly confused since I remembered that I had fallen asleep outside with Temery in my arms. I looked up and saw Akira sitting in front of the entrance, smiling mischievously at me. I just shook my head at her and went outside. Since I was a very early riser, the others weren't awake, so I decided to send some clones to get some firewood while I myself went back into my tent and gently put Temery back in her own bed. After that, I went to the fireplace and lit the wood my clones had brought with a simple fireball. I sat down in a lotus position and started to meditate until the others woke up. I found myself in my mindscape sitting next to Kurama, who was curled up in the sun and almost filled the whole clearing with his massive body. "Hey Kura," I greeted the fox while getting up and jumping onto a tree to be able to look him in the eyes. He just opened his eyes and looked at me questioning. "I just came here to tell you that we are about to go into enemy territory and that we are up against a shinobi that has killed a few squads of Iwachunin. So be ready, I might need your help again," I said while patting the fur on his snout. The fox just growled lowly in agreement. "Can you tell me about my parents?" I asked, earning a curious look from the almighty fox. "You already know who they were. What do you want to know from me?" He asked, his eyes looking straight into mine as if searching for the reason for my question. "I know that my mother was the Jinchuriki before me. I want to know how they have lived, what their hobbies were, if they were happy with how their life turned out," I explained. Let me think for a second," Kurama began. I closed my eyes and listened to him while he told me about my parents, the thought of why I had never asked him that in the time before crossing my mind. When I opened my eyes, the sun shone in all its glory and the fire was almost out. I made a few clones to collect new wood when one of Baki's clones came down to me and stood in front of me. "That won't be necessary. We will move out in 10 minutes. Wake up the others," he said before disappearing in a cloud of smoke. I saw Baki moving in his tent and went to wake up my teammates. "Okay, from now on, we are in Iwa's territory, so hide your Hidai-8 and your abilities. We will use the roads from here on. Also, I would suggest a henge since Naruto and Gaara are easily recognizable by their features. We will travel under the disguise of a family that is on vacation." Everyone understood. Baki explained to us once we were about to cross into the land of Earth. We nodded and Baki henged first into a big male, with brown long hair, blue eyes and pale skin. Gaara changed second into a boy, the same height as himself with brown short hair, blue eyes, and slightly darker skin than Baki. Temery then henged into a beautiful girl, a bit shorter than her brother with pale skin and blue eyes. Her brown hair almost reached her waist while she had two bangs framing her face that were just short enough to not fall onto her shoulders. I grinned at them and disappeared in a cloud of smoke. When the smoke cleared, there was a boy in my place, a good bit taller than Gaara with shoulder-long brown hair, which had a few blonde strands. I too had blue eyes and pale skin. We all had decided that our henges wear normal pants and shirts, although Temari had decided to give herself a vest over her shirt. "All right, what are our names?" I asked, looking at Baki. "Well, our last name will be Yakuza. My name will probably be Cairo. Your first names are up to you," our sensei said. "Then my name will be Shikaku," Gaara noted, smiling. "I think my name will be Kiara," Temari said before turning to me and waiting for my response. "Well, I was thinking about Kurama as a name, so I'll go with that," I said, smiling at my team. Chapter 24 Information. Naruto POV. "Kurama, let's go. We don't have all day. You'll have enough time to eye these swords," Kiara Aka Temari said while dragging me out of the blacksmith's shop. I pouted as my sister dragged me into our hotel. "So what did you find out?" Kairo Akabaki asked as soon as we had closed the door. "Well, our target seems to be threatening everyone. Not just farmers as we first had suspected, although it seems as if the farmers were the first to not pay him, so he made an example out of them. It apparently has had its desired effect since the other business owners won't even talk about it with us. We had to eavesdrop on their private discussions to get these informations." Temari relayed our findings. "We also found out that he apparently is currently living somewhere on the border to Stone Country," I added. Gaara Aka Shikaku smiled while Baki nodded thoughtfully. That was the first hint towards the location of our target that we had gotten. "Okay, we will do it like this. Temari, Naruto, and me will go to the presumed location of our suspect while Gaara stays behind, and if you see him you are to contact us immediately and not to engage before we are back." "Understood?" Baki asked. We all nodded when a thought came to my mind. "When do we leave?" I voiced my question. "We leave in half an hour," our father said. I nodded and went to mine and Gaara's room to get my kunai and shuriken pouches. "Okay, I see a small camp. One tent, big enough for 2 persons, a small fireplace and a chest. I don't know what is in the chest, but it seems as if someone is in the tent, because the light burns and there's a shadow moving." I relayed my observations to my teammates that were crouching under me waiting for me to come out of the treetop. I let myself fall silently on the same level of the other two. I still got slightly confused as to why Temari and Baki were here, before I remembered that we had dropped our disguises before going to this location. We looked at each other and jumped towards the small camp. Once we got there, we waited in the shadows of the trees for the person inside the camp to come out. Thankfully, we had concealed our chakra as suddenly another man jumped into the clearing and went towards the tent. "Tauma, I came back," we heard before a man came out of the tent and after looking around immediately hugged the newcomer. "I have missed you, brother. Did today bring anything good?" The voices barely reached us. After that, the two men started talking in a regular volume, which led to us not understanding the next few sentences that were exchanged. Then the now identified Tauma went to the chest that was standing next to his tent and crouched down. We knew that it was them who were terrorizing the businessmen around her when the contents of the chest were revealed. It was filled with gold and banknotes. "How much did you make today?" the other man asked while he came out of the tent. "Leonard, you always have to be straight to the point, don't you?" Tauma sighed. He took out a small scroll and threw it to his brother. The slightly taller male opened the scroll and formed a hand sign. After the small cloud of smoke had disappeared, he held a small bag in each hand. He grinned and threw one of the bags back to his brother before he reached inside his own and took a handful of coins out of the bag. "So how much is it?" Leonard asked his brother again, while he let the coins trickle back into his sack. "One bag is approximately 200.000 ryo in gold coins," Tauma answered, emptying his bag into the big chest. That is when we decided to step in. We had sent a small tiger towards Gaara to notify him that we have found our target, or in this case targets. We jumped down into the clearing and looked at the two brothers. Akira had jumped down from my shoulder and began to grow to her normal size. The two brothers watched us confused at first before realizing that we were probably there to kill them and went into a defensive position. Then there was a brief stare down between the 6 of us, the two brothers, each a short sword in hand, on the one side of the campfire, and Temari, Baki, Akira, and me on the other side. I slowly pulled out a kunai while Akira growled lowly and Temari reached for her fan. As Baki reached for a kunai, the two brothers suddenly jumped at us. Tauma engaged with Baki while Leonard went towards me. The downward slash from his kunai was blocked by Temari's fan. Akira jumped in front of me and attempted to hit our enemy with a blow, but the man jumped back just in time to avoid it. I threw my kunai at him before flashing through a few hand signs and pushing out a small amount of wind chakra, propelling the kunai at an immense speed towards my enemy. Then we heard a cry and I saw Baki getting hit by the sword of Tauma. Temari and I exchanged a look while Leonard barely blocked my kunai with his sword. "Go, help Baki, I have Akira as backup," I screamed, and Temari took off to block another slash from Tauma aimed for Baki. Okay, Akira, let's do this, I mumbled to my tiger companion, while I watched Leonard jump at us again. I took out another kunai and blocked his sword with it and then engaged in a small exchange of kenjutsu. I finally managed to lock him in a struggle for strength, giving Akira the chance to lash out at him again. The shinobi backflipped, breaking our struggle and avoiding death by Akira's claws, although he got hit on his left leg. Akira had managed to tear through his leg protectors and do a considerable amount of damage, if the pool of blood was anything to go by. I grinned, threw my kunai at him, and when he brought up his sword to block it, flashed through another series of hand signs, and suddenly the kunai multiplied and now there were 10 kunai flying towards Leonard, forcing him to dodge to his right. As soon the man jumped, he knew he had fucked up since Akira stood where he was headed ready to take him down. Chapter 25 Kill. Temari POV. I blocked Tama's sword and pushed him back, staying in front of Baki covering him while he tried to stand up. I trained my eyes on my enemy when suddenly he disappeared. I felt his presence behind me and on pure instinct ducked under his slash and turned around, grabbing him and flinging him over my shoulder into a tree. I looked at him and saw that he was bleeding at his left leg. But before I could actually realize the advantage that gave me, I had to block yet another downward slash. He jumped back and went through a set of hand signs. My eyes grew wide when I saw him spitting out a few water bullets which came at me at an insane speed. I dropped my fan and went through my own hand signs without thinking and managed just in time to create the wind bullets to counter Tama's jutsu. After that I saw him coming at me with his sword drawn again. I panicked slightly, seeing that I had dropped my fan and couldn't pick it up in time. I saw him moving at me and got a kunai out of my pouch and tried to block the sword while ducking away. I felt the sword making contact with my kunai and tried to hold against it, but Tama was just too strong and I lost the grip on my kunai. I screamed as the sword cut into my hand, although I managed to pull my hand away before the sword had done any severe damage. I back a bit, focusing a bit of my chakra to my hand, trying to suppress the pain. I glared at Tama, taking another kunai into my unharmed left hand while putting my right hand behind my back, shielding it from any more damage. Baki was still not even opening his eyes, so I couldn't resort to any help from him. Naruto was still fighting Leonard, although his situation seemed much better than mine since he had managed to wound his opponent on a leg. I sighed, realizing that I wouldn't get any help for quite some time. Looking again at Tama, I found him going through a series of hand signs. My eyes widened as a giant dragon made out of water came towards me. I immediately pushed chakra into my legs and jumped as far away as possible. But while I was in the air, the dragon crashed into the spot where I had been standing, and the resulting shockwave hit me and I lost control over my body. I spun wildly until crashing into a tree. I screamed in pain but still managed to land upright on the ground again. I knelt under the tree, searching my surroundings for my opponent before hearing something moving towards me. I looked up and saw Tama coming at me, his sword at the ready. I screamed in terror as I knew that I couldn't react fast enough to block the sword, and in my condition I couldn't even dodge the slash. I closed my eyes as my death seemed to come closer to me, waiting for the pain to come. But suddenly I heard a clang, and, opening my eyes, I saw that stood in front of me, his hands tightly holding onto a kunai that was blocking Tama's sword from impaling both Naruto and me. Tama soon broke away and jumped back, looking a bit surprised at the sudden entry of Naruto in our fight. I looked to my left and saw Leonard being torn to shreds by Akira. The sight of something so brutal made me feel sick. I looked back at Tama and managed to stop my gagging reflex. Naruto looked at his new opponent angrily and charged at him, kunai in hand. I immediately noticed what he was planning to do, since it was one of our trained tactics in a 2-on-1 situation, and followed closely behind, drawing a kunai myself. Naruto engaged Tama in a short kenjutsu battle while I stood back and waited for an opportune moment. Then suddenly one of Naruto's slashes was blocked and Tama pushed against Naruto's kunai, trying to overpower him and to force him to back away. I saw this and immediately charged at the unsuspecting shinobi. Thrusting my kunai at his chest, I impaled him, earning a shocked gasp from Tama. He dropped his sword and looked down onto the kunai in his chest. I too looked at the kunai and, realizing what I just did, let go of it and staggered back, staring at the wound which started to bleed even more than it had before. I again felt sick, but this time I couldn't keep my composure, and while Tama's lifeless body fell to the ground, I turned away and emptied my stomach onto the grass. Naruto saw this and immediately went over to me and knelt down next to me. "Tama, are you all right?" he asked while leading me away from the bloody corpse towards the edge of the little clearing. "Come here," he whispered before pulling me into a hug. I hugged him back and just let my emotions run wild. I cried into his shoulder for a long time before either of us spoke. I started but couldn't finish the sentence because I had to cry again. "SHH, it's all right, you had to do it," Naruto muttered. Then I felt him turn slightly and turned around too to see what was happening. Apparently Gaara just came into the clearing and saw Baki still lying on the ground unconscious. "Hi, Gaara," I greeted and even managed to smile a little. "What happened?" Gaara asked while looking at Naruto. "She just had her first kill. Would you mind to dispose of the body and to help Baki?" Naruto explained and asked while slowly rubbing my back. Yeah, I guess, Kara mumbled and then jumped away towards our sensei. Chapter 26 Giving Back. Naruto POV. I watched Gaara as he checked if Baki was awake already before disposing of Tama's corpse. I looked over the clearing and saw Akira sitting next to Leonard's body while cleaning her fur, which was full of blood. Gaara went over to her and disposed of the second body too. I tightened my arms around Temari a bit before standing up to see the sun rise over the treetops. I smiled, helping Temari up, and grinned. You had to do it. There is nothing to be sad about. I tried cheering her up. I am glad that I can't take a life so easily, because that would mean that I am a monster. Temari explained, smiling slightly while Gaara was walking over to us. How is Baki doing? The blonde girl asked her brother. I think he is just unconscious. He should wake up any minute. Gaara replied. Looking over the partly destroyed camp, he suddenly grinned widely. What are we going to do with this stuff? He asked while letting his sand carry the chest over to us. My eyes went wide seeing how much gold coins were in it, along with a bunch of scrolls, likely containing even more money, and a few other valuable-looking things. I don't know. I would suggest that we wait for Baki to wake up before we decide on anything. But I think we all want to know just how much money these bandits robbed, so maybe we could count the money and sort everything out, I suggested. My teammates nodded and we got to our task. When Baki had finally woken up, we were already finished with sorting the valuables. I sat in between approximately 20 swords and knives. Currently, I was holding a large katana with a black handle and a silver blade. Its sheath was a dark blue with a few red ornaments engraved into it. Temari had taken to counting the gold coins and all the other money and had put them into little piles of 200 coins each. She had accounted for around 200,000 coins whose value we were not sure about. Gaara was surrounded by a whole bunch of other valuables, mostly rings, necklaces, and bracelets. He had amassed around 60 items total and was currently looking at a ring that was decorated with a few seals which he found intriguing. I noticed Baki moving and put the sword I was inspecting down. After a brief explanation what had happened while our sensei was knocked unconscious, he looked at the things we had sorted and his eyes widened a bit. Wow, that is quite a bit of gold. He murmured. What are you going to do with it? He asked while looking us straight in the eye. We don't know. We wanted to ask you what we should do with it since we don't know who it belongs to. We just sorted it a bit while we were waiting for you to wake up. Temari explained. That is very good. You didn't become greedy. But this stuff belongs to us, so you can go ahead and take some things that you like. Baki said, smiling. Our eyes went wide. What? We shouted at him. Our leader just chuckled, grinning wildly. You see, the farmers had no money to pay for this mission, which was somewhat logical since they came to us to get rid of the robbers. But they had offered us a very generous deal. If we could get rid of the people who had been stealing from them, then we could take everything that they owned without having to give back the stuff belonging to the farmers. So if you have an idea of what to do with this stuff, just say so, because the stuff that we are not going to use, we will bring back to Suna, and there it will be stored until someone comes along and either buys it off of us or we can give it to one of our shinobi. Baki explained. Gaara looked at the stuff he had amassed around him. I think we should at least give these back to their owners if we can find them. I mean, they are just accessories, Gaara suggested. Temari and I nodded, looking at our team leader. Baki looked at us and then at the stuff we had spread on the ground. Okay, but how are we going to give the people their stuff back while ensuring that we give the things to the people to whom they belong? He asked. Maybe we could give the jewelry anonymously to Iwagakure with a note that we have found them in the woods. Then we can go back to Suna while the hidden stone can struggle with giving back the accessories. I reasoned. Baki chuckled lightly and smiled at me. That is a great plan, Temari, and you will bring the stuff to the gates of Iwagakure this night, Baki said, grinning at us. Temari looked at me and smiled sadly, knowing that we would have to travel at full speed the whole distance to even make it to the capital of the land of Earth. We can do this, I said, smiling. While taking the sealing scroll Baki was holding out to me. We will be waiting for you on the border between the land of Earth and Ishigakure, Baki said, while they were sealing the rest of the stuff into 2 other scrolls. Temari hugged. Well, we'll be off then, I said, waving goodbye to Gaara and Baki before jumping after Temari. And with that, I'll see you all in the next part. For those who are interested, we have a Discord down below. Be sure to aim for the stars, and drink plenty of water. And take care until next we see each other again.